go to my PowerPoint presentation. I know you could read this information, but I did want to, of course, mention that we are not tax professionals. So our support team is not tax professionals. Our implementation team, we may know things. We might be enough to be dangerous, but we're not going to be able to provide you tax advice or advice on should you cover this person and stuff like that. We might know what the rules and laws say, but please consult with an advisor, a consultant, benefits provider, whatever it is that you need to do to get those questions answered on should this person be covered, or, that kind of information when, people might be have to offer benefits and so forth. All of that stuff, we cannot tell you how that should work. Once you know the answer and you say, okay, I need to cover this person or this, benefit at a certain time or something like that, then we can help you set up the system to do that based off of that advice that you've received from your advisor or your consultant. So make sure you get that information from them first. And let's talk about these deadlines real quick. Again, I had it up on the screen before, but a couple of different things here. You'll notice, of course, the paper copies, if you're going to send off the paper copies to the IRS, they're due on the 28th of February. The paper copies to the employees, or if you publish them to self-service, are actually due on March 1st, a couple of days later, because it is a leap year. So those are due on March 1st. And then if you're doing electronically, which makes your life a little bit easier, a little more breathing room, those electronic copies, that way you don't need to do the paper, are due on April 1st. So you'll still need to publish them out to the employees and, hand them out, but you don't need to file them. So maybe you hand them out to the employees and they say, hey, my address is wrong or something. You can fix that before you file it with the IRS. So just be aware you do have a little bit of breathing room if you choose the electronic version. All right. I know obviously some people are posting in the Q&A. I did want to mention, of course, we have a Q&A out there in a chat if you do have any questions out there. So let me go ahead back over to the system and restart over here. So let's go ahead and go here. Oops. Zoom is a little bit slow today. All right, so here, I just want to mention, again, we're not going to be doing too much over here as far as in self-service. Now, on the employees, if you choose to publish your ACA forms to self-service, that's where they'll be able to view them in their documents. But for an administrator, you're not going to do a lot over here because all of it is in the back end. So let's go over to the back end and we'll talk about looking at an employee's record. So I'll pick Ted here because he's got completed information and your demographics. You're going to want to make sure this information is correct because this stuff prints on the forms. So make sure their name is spelled correctly. You have the correct social security number, information here, gender, date of birth, etc., that is correct for that information. If you're going to send out the forms via email, of course, you want to make sure you have the right email address there because otherwise it will go to some wrong email address. So make sure that is correct. Of course, their actual address, their physical address. Now, this is something, of course, you may allow employees to update in self-service. So perhaps you tell them, send out an email blast saying, hey, check out your email, or sorry, your address in the system and update it if it's not right. Because sometimes people move and they forget to update self-service because all they get is direct deposit. And then, that still works even if they moved. So make sure that they do that. Now, of course, if you need to correct that, you can correct it manually as well. But you can see that address there. I'm going to start off with dependents and beneficiaries information. You'll want to make sure that this stuff is correct if you have to print out that stuff for self-insured. So, their spouse's name, their date of birth and or social security number, and their address and so forth is correct. Apparently they live in Canada, but, of course, make sure this information is correct in there. And, maybe they've got children or other people that they're covering. Make sure that information is in here because that flows over to the benefit plans. As I was trying to indicate before, you may need to show inactive to see the plans for last year. If your benefit plan year is a calendar year, you're going to see the 2024 stuff here. And of course, 2023 is what we're reporting on. So you'll want to make sure that that information was correct for last year. And as an example, look at this information here. You'll want to see your dependents are correct. Of course, if you were using the system for payroll, you probably would know if those numbers weren't right, but there's a chance that maybe somebody didn't have their spouse covered technically in the system, even though they were covered by the plan. So you'll want to make sure that their spouse or their children is properly indicated on here because that's going to go onto the forms. If we don't have it checked here, it can't print on the forms because it doesn't know that they had coverage. So I'll make sure those are right, and especially like the effective date, expiration date. Let's say they got married in the middle of the year, and that it was effective in July. So go ahead and put that in there. All right, so that's that. Now, once you have verified this stuff on the employees, there is, of course, some setup. You'll need to make sure it happened, probably already happened, but happened here on your benefit plans. So you go to whatever medical plans are ACA eligible, and you'll want to make sure that this box is checked. Because if it's not, we don't know that it's a ACA eligible plan. Because that way, here's the checkbox. So make sure this is checked. If you go to create your forms and you're missing like everybody in a certain plan, or something like that, go ahead and check this box, and then you can redo the forms to make sure that it's right. So double check that. Of course, you can always come in after you generate plans and check this in and fix it if you are missing some people or something like that. Oh, one last thing on the employees, of course, is their hire dates and possibly termination dates. So when you go to their employment information, you want to make sure that this stuff is right as far as let's say their start date here. Maybe they started in the middle of the year, make sure that date is correct. If they termed sometime during the year, make sure that's there. Maybe they were termed and they came back. So you make sure those dates are correct, because when we generate the forms, we're going to look at those dates to put out there, oh, they should have had coverage up through this date, or it should have started on this particular date. So you will want to make sure these dates are correct. And of course, you can fix them if you need to. One thing to, of course, be aware is if you fix this date here, you might need to go back to the position and fix the effective date here. So just be aware that, of course, if they've been, around for several years and nothing has changed, you just double check it, make sure that stuff is right. All right, so as far as generating the forms, now I'm going to do that through our system. You can, if you would like, also use Atrix for this. They have an option to generate the forms out of there. That does have a cost associated with it, but you can generate the forms using Atrix. If you've been using it, let's say for your tax filing, maybe it'd be convenient because they actually have a discount. If you do your W-2s and ACA through Atrix, there's a discount. I don't recall what it is, but I do know there's a discount. So maybe you want to take a look at that. But here's ACA. Now, I've got the last few years in here, so I can go into one of these older ones if I like, but what I'm going to do is go ahead and generate this year's form. So I'll go ahead and just click this button to generate. And this will take a few moments here to go through all my employees, and it will create one for this year. So here you go, 2023. Now I won't see 24 because I'm not generating the forms for 2024. Yes, I'm distributing them in 2024, but it's looking back at last year. So I'll come into here, and here you go. You got your information that's going to be on your ACA form. So you'll want to make sure you have the correct first name, last name, title, and contact phone number for whoever it is that, maybe it's yourself, maybe it's a VP of HR, maybe it's the CEO, whoever it is you want to be as the contact person for the actual forms. So this is your employer contact, not like the employee's name. So you'll see this information there. You go ahead and just type that in. If you make a change, you can just save that, of course. Right, you go down here, you'll see the different employee counts per month. I don't have a lot of activity with, terminations and so forth. So my employee count stays relatively the same. But if you needed to, you can go ahead and, change these dates. If you didn't have it for the full year, maybe you started business in the middle of the year, or maybe this is an employer that stopped business sometime in the year, you, of course, can do that. Now, if you do have multiple employers, you are considered one of those aggregates, you'll want to check that box off, and then you'll put down the different employers down here. So if you did have multiple, you would have to come down here, click add, and put in the other employer name and their EIN, their federal EIN, I should specify there. So employer B or whatever it is, and whatever their, whatever it is, right? And you put that in there. Of course, you might have multiple. Maybe you've got 4 or 5, you just add them all down in here. All right, if I need to edit these numbers, I can right in there and put that in there for that information there. Now, a lot of people would like to see this information ahead of time because it's really not clear exactly what your form is going to look like when you just look like this. Now, you can just click download forms and then look at them in a PDF. What I prefer is actually this right here, which is import. So this is where it's kind of a little bit misleading because you can actually export the information before you import it into the system. So if you want to look at it, you'll notice you have a button right here that allows you to export this stuff out to a spreadsheet. So that generated a spreadsheet. What I'm going to do here is bring this up on my screen here. Just give me one moment to share my Excel. So it generates an Excel for you. All right, so here you can see that information. Now, this is the same information that you just saw in the system here, but I can override it if I need to. So like the contact information is right here. Of course, it's blank because it was blank on the other screen. So once I put in whoever it is, if I were to hit export, it would have that stuff there. All right, here's the employer monthly information. Now, I never clicked save. That's why this is not checked. If I had, this would be checked. All right. Aggregated large employers. So this is where those EIN, again, I didn't click save, so it's not here, but I could put them through here instead. Maybe it's easier for you to do it through a spreadsheet. Here are the employees. Now, of course, my stuff is just junk. That's why everybody's social security looks very similar, but you can see here, here's all the employee names, their socials, their addresses, etc. And then you'll notice the codes for each, the offer of coverage, OOC. So you see the various codes there. And then there's the cost, the employer share of the benefits right there. So you can have those. Now, when we export it out, we actually export out everything as text. That's why that has a little green on there. I could, of course, convert it to a number if I want to see it maybe a little more clearly. What I would say is if you are going to make edits here and then bring that stuff back in, recommend making a copy in Excel, save this as something else before you really mess around with the formatting. Maybe you're going to have a team working on it or something like that, because you want to make sure you have one like clean copy to import. So you might want to keep the original and then distribute your copy and then, merge them together. So you can see the employer share, and then here's the codes for their eligibility. So, they're full-time employee all year, or they're part-time, or they started sometime in the middle of the year. That's what the different codes are here. Again, if you have any questions on those codes, that's where you can talk with a consultant. The IRS, of course, has guidelines on this as well. What is 2A versus 2B and 2H, and et cetera. Same thing with these over here. Why is it blank and then 1A for this person or whatever? There's guidelines in the IRS for what these various things mean. We generate based off of the dates in the system. So like here, this person was an employee, whoever this is, you're employed for a short amount of time. All right, so just a few months, they probably were hired somewhere in there, they were an employee, and then they had term, so they didn't have coverage, or they weren't offered coverage for all year. All right, so I can make changes in here and, whatever I need to do to, edit these if I see something is wrong. Now, of course, like I mentioned, the address and the name and stuff like that, you'd want to probably update that in the system versus importing it in, because if I import this in, let's say I change somebody's address here, it doesn't go back to their demographics or their address screen and update them, unless Connor and Patrick are yelling at me right now. It does not do that. It only updates the forms. So if you see social security number is wrong and you update it here, it's not going to go back and update their social security number for everything else. So like their W-2 would have the wrong social and so forth. So make sure that you fix it at the root, which is on their demographic screen or their address screen. Same thing with these dates. If I go through and mess around with these and I change these things here, it's not going to go back and change the person's hire date or termination date. Now, you might need to make some adjustment here. Maybe there was a situation where you acquired the company and their dates aren't right and you just want to fix it in the sheet. That's certainly fine. You can welcome to do that and import it back in. But it's not going to go back and update their hire date or their termination date if you do that. All right, dependent information. So again, if I add stuff in here, and let's say that I'm doing self-insured and I have this stuff here, and I added the social, the date of birth and stuff like that, it again is not going to go back and update the dependents or their coverage if I change it on this spreadsheet. Now, I don't have one here because I'm not self-insured, but if I did, it would not go back and update those dependents. All right, so this is where you could make changes to this or just review it on in Excel here and make sure everything is correct. I highly recommend you look at this here, or within the system, you hit that download forms button that will generate the ACA forms for you. So if you do make changes to this spreadsheet, let me go back to the sheet and I'm going to close this and switch back over to my browser here. Somewhere's on here. Here it is. And if I make some changes on this spreadsheet, I want to bring those in, what I can do is just browse to where I saved it and then hit import. You'll notice here, it'll import the current year values. So if I do that, it's going to regenerate or correct whatever's in the system. So, and what I mean by that is the actual forms here. So if I changed a bunch of stuff, it's going to change it on here and on the employee records only within this filing. Right. And so that's what that will do there. Now, once you have done that, or maybe you want to review them in a PDF, you can hit this download forms button. Now, I've already clicked that. You can see here it's actually downloading. So what this is doing is just sending over a zip file of all the PDFs, and you can review them in this zip file if you would like. So let me show you what it will do here. I'm going to just open up my one from last year that I downloaded previously. So it'll be one big zip file called ACA. Now, you may notice, I'm not sure if it showed on the screen there, it was called ACA 1 because I've already downloaded this before. So it's going to make a big PDF, or sorry, big zip file with all the PDFs inside of it that you'll need to just unzip. So once you do that, you're going to get a folder on your downloads or wherever it is you keep your downloads. Now, we don't control, there's nothing that Criterion can do about where you save your downloads. But what it will do is it will generate a PDF. Now, you're going to get one PDF per person. So as an example, it's going to look like this. So this is the 1095-C for George Adams. And you'll notice we have different pages here. All right, so I've got one for each employee and they're multiple pages. So this is what you would distribute out to your employees. You'd print these out and then hand it out to George. And you'll see, of course, their information here. There's like the different codes. Now, this is the one for last year, but don't worry about that. As far as this presentation, it's going to look very similar. You'll see here like the codes, the 1E for line 14 and the amounts for the employer required contribution. And then line 16 is the safe harbor method. So now I can't, if I change something here, there's no way to like upload it into the system. So if you have like a PDF editor and you change the codes in here, then you've changed the form from what the system generated. It's just basically your standalone thing on your computer. It does not go back into the system. So if you do see something wrong on, let's say, George's form here, and you want to go and fix it, you could always do that download the Excel that I just looked at, make the correction there, upload it back in, and then generate the form again. All right, so that's how you could do that. So you can, of course, review each employee. Now, you should also, let me find it, have the 1094. Let me share that. This, of course, is the employer one here. So 1094C, so there's the employer name and address, the person contact. Now, you may remember I didn't put that in there, so that's why it's blank. So there's a contact information. And then, the number of forms. Well, previously I had a lot more. And am I part of a large group? This is where if I checked yes there, I'd do that. Here's the employee count per month. And of course, if I did have multiple employers, they would all be here. So that would be an example of what the forms look like. Again, this is one for last year, so don't worry about it, but it looks the same for this year. In fact, I don't know if the download finished. Let's just see here. Nope, it's still downloading. It's a big file. So depending on how many forms you have, it might take you a few minutes because each PDF is, it's not gigantic, but they're, maybe half a megabyte each. And if you had 500 people zipped up, that's going to be 500 4-page documents zipped up. It's going to be a pretty big download. So it might take a while to download. In fact, mine just finished. So let me show you what it looked like. It doesn't look any different. As far as I know, I think it just says 2023 on it. So the one you were looking at before was 2022, and then here is 2023. So company name, again, I didn't put the contact information, the number of forms is different. And then there's that employee count you saw previously on the screen. And again, I didn't save, so I didn't put that stuff there. But there you go. Now, you might be able to edit this in your PDF viewer, depending on whatever you're using. So you could put in, the name, the EIN, et cetera, for different employers, and you could change the numbers again. If you have a PDF editor, you could change it, but it's never going to write back to the system. So now you've done your own forms. You'd have to handle your own filing. At that point, you'd have to send them in as paper by the deadline of February 28th. All right, so back into the system. And let's go ahead and do this. All right, so you'll see these here. Now, just to clarify, this will go to the previous year. So now I'm in 22 and 21, et cetera. If I want to just delete everything, because maybe I generated it and it's just a bunch of garbage because we didn't have the right benefits information on a ton of employees or something, you'll see I can just hit delete and that'll start it all over. Right? If I had already like handed them out, of course, I wouldn't want to delete that because I've handed out that information. But there we go. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Brittany, Connor, or Patrick. We handle the transmission for us. All you need to do is reach out to support about getting it transmitted. So if you would like to have us transmit it, reach out to support. We'll help you transmit it, and then it will show the date that we transmitted electronically. This does not reflect if you mail it in. We don't record that date. But if we do it electronically, it does reflect that.
Yes, we'll be sending out our ACA email next week for steps on how to submit that to us.
Perfect. All right, so 2 more minutes. I do not have time to cover it here, and it's but it is very straightforward to go through here. If you like to use Atrix for this, you do have the option. It's under payroll reports. So even if you're not using payroll, it's still here under payroll reports. You'll see government reports. And one of the options here is under federal, you'll have your 1094, 1095 forms right here. All right, of course, you'd want to change the year to 23 and then generate. So when you hit accept, now to do this, there's a whole bunch of things that go into Atrix. I think we did training on Atrix. I don't recall exactly. You have to set up an account first. Now, it doesn't cost you anything to set up an account. You just need to have one because it makes you log in as soon as you hit this. If you don't have an account, you can't log in, but this will generate the forms, then you can edit them in there and so forth. They would do the transmit in that situation. All right, so let's go back to my final sheet here. This is our current schedule of our upcoming seminars, or webinars, I should say. So in a couple of weeks, we are going to be covering the career path, which is something that we added a couple of revisions ago. And then we're going to go to immersive onboarding, so a couple HR features you might be interested in. And then finally, the Affordable Care Act reporting, we're going to cover this again. Hopefully I won't have any audio issues for the first 5 minutes in that one. But, maybe between now and then you've had a chance to look at these and there might be some questions that come up or something like that. Certainly welcome to join us again and ask those questions through the Q&A there. Now, we're not going to be able to go into your specific scenario, but if you have like a generic question, we can certainly help you there. If you do have specific questions on it, like Brittany said, you need help on transmitting it or something like that, you'll see here our contact information. So our phone number, email address, you can reach out to us and ask those specific questions about you. Again, we're not tax advisors or benefit advisors, but once you have that information you need to set up, or maybe you just can't remember how to export it or something like that, reach out to us. We're here to help you out with that. So thank you for joining us. Appreciate you. I'm sorry about the first 5 minutes, the audio issues, but thank you so much for joining us, and I will hope to see you all again in a couple of weeks.